I'm actually really proud of myself because I've only refreshed the voter map twice today. Good job, me. Welcome to the Today Show Today with your host, Katie Steinruck. I'm sorry I haven't recorded an episode of the Today Show Today since the beginning of the year, but I'm sure you will forgive me eventually. Anyway, today's topic of conversation is going to be a little bit different than what I've done in the past. We're not going to be ruining perfectly good ingredients for recipes. We're not going to be looking at cool and interesting and strange snacks from Asia. Today, we're going to be talking about real-life body horror. That's right, I'm talking about vaginas. I'm going to be talking about IUDs. I'm going to be talking about things going completely wrong for me personally. So if that's not really your cup of tea, or if you're under the age of 18 and you just feel like this is deeply inappropriate for your age group, by all means turn it off. But I would strongly recommend giving it a chance, because chances are you either have a vagina and might be thinking about having an IUD placed and want to know all the information, or you know someone who has a vagina and you care about them. This is meant to be purely educational, not sensational. And as always, your mileage may vary. Please understand that what happened to me may not necessarily happen to you, and that things may go totally fine if you choose to have an IUD placed. Point in fact, after hearing this story, hopefully you will know how to have the IUD placed in a way that is safer and better than what I went through. Thank you very much. So to begin with, there are many different kinds of birth control out there. Some of them will work better for you than others. The IUD is interesting because you can have it placed, and depending on which IUD you choose, it will either have a hormonal element or it won't have a hormonal element, and it will last for anywhere from 3 to 7 to 12 years, depending on which one you pick. My first IUD that I had placed was a copper IUD, which typically lasts about 12 years to prevent pregnancy. And that sounded really appealing to me because I have had really bad experiences with oral hormonal birth control. And unfortunately, I'm not allowed to use the NuvaRing anymore for medical reasons, even though it was perfect for me. It's heartbreaking. But in any case, it can be a really good, convenient way to protect yourself in the event of rape or things along those lines. Hopefully you're not with a partner who is thinking to themselves, condoms are uncomfortable and therefore you should go through all this expense and danger to your body in order to appease me. Because if that's the case, leave their ass. I'm telling you right now, not worth it. But if you're just looking for a way to make your body work better for you, great. We're on the right track. So I had my IUD placed with Planned Parenthood. And it's important to mention this because Planned Parenthood is a mostly publicly funded institution and has been under fire from the federal government for years. And as a result, since they kind of have less funding than perhaps an OBGYN would have, they don't necessarily have the know-how or the equipment available to have IUDs placed correctly. Therein lies my problem. I went to Planned Parenthood because I'm covered under Medicaid, and I just thought they'll cover it, and that is about as much as I thought about it. I read plenty of horror stories prior to having this IUD placed. I heard about women who passed out from the pain of having it placed. I heard about women who bled for a long time or had extensive cramps for several days. You know, I heard the gamut, and it is important to read about women's experiences before you go into something like this, because it's just nice to know what you might be dealing with. So when I went into this process, I definitely made sure that I would not have anything that I needed to do urgently for the next 2 days, because I knew there would be a chance that I wouldn't be able to get out of bed for 2 days after having the IUD placed. Unfortunately, this is not always the case for many vagina havers who are in labor-intensive jobs or on call or things of that nature. So it's important to factor that in. I went in to have the IUD put in, and you know, they asked me a series of questions, took a pregnancy test just to be sure, and they do this so that even if you don't think you're pregnant, they know for sure that there's not going to be an ectopic pregnancy or any unforeseen problems having the IUD placed, basically. And I told my nurse who put the IUD in how nervous I was about this process. I was prepared for it to be unbelievably painful. And she was very kind and kind of calmed me down about the whole thing. And she was like, it will be over so quickly, and you'll have a little bit of cramping and spotting afterwards, but it's not going to be a big deal, I promise. And I was like, okay. And sure enough, when the IUD was placed, it really wasn't as painful as I was expecting it to be. If you're unfamiliar with how the process works, they will basically place 3 stents into your cervix of ever-increasing diameter. And as each one is placed, you'll feel a big menstrual cramp 3 times, which honestly wasn't too bad. I was expecting it to be like a stabbing sensation, and it really wasn't. It was just like a dull ache each time the stent went in. And the nurse was very good about warning me each time she was going to be placing a stent, so I wasn't like shocked each time. Then when the IUD went in, she takes the stents out, and don't feel pressured to get up and leave right away after that happens. You might feel like you're fine, but do sit there and lay there for about 5 to 10 minutes, just to let your body kind of acclimate to what in essence was some trauma that occurred. I mean, it's important to remember that the opening to the cervix is unbelievably small, especially if you're not on your period. And the uterus itself is pretty small when you aren't pregnant. It's like a tiny little thing. That's just gone through kind of an ordeal, so be sure to lay there so you don't get up and immediately like feel dizzy and throw up, which thankfully did not happen to me. The nurse asked me if I wanted a pad or a panty liner to deal with the spotting that was, the bleeding that was going on, which was an interesting way to pose that question, because I was asking myself, well, how much am I bleeding? It doesn't sound like a lot if she is offering me a panty liner. So I took the panty liner. And thankfully I had my partner drive me, so I wouldn't have to drive to get home, because as we were driving, I immediately felt this like overwhelming cramping that was making me feel nauseous and a little dizzy. So it was good to have someone drive me. By the time I got home, I had soaked through that panty liner with blood. And I was like, wow, that's a lot. So I put in another panty liner. And I was in bed, definitely unable to really move, and was just interested in trying to sleep off the pain. After that, I woke up, realized I had bled through another panty liner, and I was like, spotting, huh? We're going with spotting as a description for this. So I started using normal pads that you would use if you were on your period. I was soaking through one of those probably once every 2 hours. It was a lot of blood. But when you're new to this, and your doctor really doesn't explain how much blood is a lot of blood, it's hard to know if you're actually in trouble or not, because you've been told that you were going to bleed a little bit. Well, I am here to tell you that if you are soaking through a pad in less than 3 hours, that's too much blood, and you need to seek medical help right away. I did not do this. I just sort of dealt with it, and after about a day, I was beginning to feel really dizzy, really weak, a little bit nauseous. I was having trouble walking. I was having trouble pushing or pulling things that were heavy, or picking up anything that's heavy, which is another thing to keep in mind based on what sort of career or job you have, because if you can't lift things, sometimes you can't work, right? And I was kind of keeping these feelings on the down low because I didn't want to worry anybody in my household. And I just was honestly uncertain of my own experience. I was uncertain if what I was feeling was normal or not. So eventually I did call an on-call nurse through Medicaid because I was in so much pain and I was bleeding so much. And she really wasn't equipped to know the answer. I could hear her Googling things in the background, like, what is too much blood? And she goes, okay, are you feeling like you're gonna faint? And I was like, no. She goes, okay, well, call us if you do feel like you're about to faint. Otherwise, it sounds like a normal amount of blood. Again, I'm here to tell you it was not a normal amount of blood at all. So several days passed, and the bleeding was not stopping or slowing down at all. Ultimately, what was happening is I was going anemic, and I didn't know it. I called Planned Parenthood because I was starting to get worried. And I was like, can you maybe take an ultrasound and see if there's something wrong? And they're like, well, we can go ahead and like physically check to see if it's placed there and that it didn't like slip or fall out. Which is not at all what I needed, but I took the appointment because they wouldn't be able to see me for a week. And I was like, I need to be seen soon. So I took the appointment. And then I decided to reach out to my OBGYN. And I was like, is this normal? I just wrote her an email. I was like, is this normal? Another thing to probably know, if you don't know this, is that if you have a primary care doctor or an OBGYN, it costs you nothing to speak to them through an online portal. Absolutely use that resource, no matter what your insurance is or whatever. Talk to them through the portal because that will be the fastest way to get a hold of them and it will cost you nothing. I emailed my OBGYN and she said, nothing about your experience is normal. You need an ultrasound right away. Unfortunately, we can't see you until Monday, which at the time was like 4 days away. But if we have a spot sooner, we will certainly fit you in immediately. And I was like, oh my God, okay, all right. And I was buckling up for the long haul of being in an enormous amount of pain for now 2 weeks. And continuing to bleed all of that time. The amount of money that I spent on pads and tampons was out of control. I probably spent like $60 just trying to stop this blood flow. Thankfully, my OBGYN was able to fit me into her schedule during her lunch hour a couple of days early. So of course I rushed in and they took the ultrasound, which I am about to show you because it is unbelievable. I kept the photo as a keepsake of my experience, and my technician very kindly outlined where the IUD was. So what are we looking at here? We've got the walls of my uterus right here, and these little lines right here represent the IUD. Now normally an IUD would be like a little goalie, like on a football stadium, like holding its little arms out to block the fallopian tubes like this. Like, yay, here we go. As you can see, the arms on mine are kind of tilted like this, which meant that they were stabbing through the walls of my uterus and causing unbelievable pain and bleeding for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks. So the technician was like, we'll send it in to the doctor and see if she feels like it needs to be removed or what needs to happen. And I was expecting to wait to hear from the doctor for about half an hour. It took 2 minutes. And my OBGYN was like, we need to get this out now, like immediately. And I was like, oh, okay. And she was like, first of all, I don't know that the way this IUD was placed would have prevented pregnancy at all. And second of all, it damaged your uterus. The phrase that she used was that the damage was not permanent. Great. And my doctor was frankly furious with Planned Parenthood. She was like, why did you go to them? And I was like, well, they took my insurance and I wanted to support them. They're a good organization. And she's like, yes, but they don't place the IUD with ultrasound guidance, which is a really outdated procedure. People don't do that anymore. It's no longer kind of a place it and pray type of situation. You have to have an IUD placed with ultrasound guidance, otherwise you don't know what you're doing. Which makes total sense to me now. So that's pretty much my experience. After about a month and a half, I finally healed up and stopped bleeding. I was taking iron supplements and eating a lot of red meat just to try to keep my energy up. Main takeaways of today. Your mileage may vary. Be prepared for any terrible eventualities with the IUD. Go to an OBGYN as opposed to Planned Parenthood to have the IUD placed because you need to have ultrasound guidance. And believe women. I was not expecting Planned Parenthood to just not believe that what I was going through was a major problem. And frankly, I'm kind of disappointed. It's like if anyone should be believing people who have vaginas, it's them. And they let me go anemic for 3 weeks. 5, make sure that you allot plenty of time for rest after this procedure. I would say 2 or 3 days, at least. 6, take 8 ibuprofen, not 6, before your procedure. Obviously, if your body can handle it. If your kidneys are shot, don't do that. But if you can, do 7 after the procedure. Be sure to just lay there for a good 10 to 20 minutes. Don't feel rushed to leave. Do what you have to do. 8, have someone drive you to your appointment, because you just never know if you're going to be in any condition to operate a vehicle after something traumatic like this. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you have any additional questions about my experience or about IUDs in general, absolutely reach out to me. I have no qualms talking about this stuff. And I just want to make sure that nobody goes through what I went through. Love you lots. Bye-bye.